The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is a game that I never thought would have a lot of lore to it, but after playing it, I was absolutely shocked to see the revelations that they actually went through with the main story, and how it actually changes the timeline as we know it. Odds are most of you are still getting through the game, so if you don't want to be spoiled, definitely click off of the video. This is a obvious spoiler warning. Clearly we're talking about the story and the ending here, so if you finish the game and are a little confused by what's going on, I'm here to hopefully clear up a lot of misconceptions for you. Also, please note that it's very early, and as best as I am going to try to explain this, there's probably people out there that are finding even better theories and better explanations, so just remember as we go in, a lot of this is still theory and speculation based off of what Nintendo had given us. But without further ado, let's dive into the story and ending of The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Echoes of Wisdom is a pretty straightforward game at the beginning. I mean, literally it takes until about halfway through the game until it really starts ramping up with a unique story. The game starts off with Link obviously entering what seems to be the final temple or the final dungeon in his adventure, where he's got his max hearts, his leveled up sword and shield, he's ready to go. And he goes against Ganon, but it's a very simple battle for Link, where Ganon is seemingly defeated a lot quicker and easier than most of the iterations that we've seen in the past. Ganon then dissipates into a purple particle smoke until eventually he's consumed by a purple rift, and right at the last second shoots an arrow to free Zelda from her imprisonment. Zelda is then able to run out and escape the dungeon before getting consumed by the rift. She's then greeted by the townsfolk as she makes her way to see her father, the King of Hyrule. It's not long before him and most of the castle get consumed by a giant rift, where he actually saves Zelda and pushes her out of the way. But out of the rift comes copies of lots of the inhabitants of the castle, including the king himself, which the fake copy orders Zelda to be in prison and claims she's the one that's causing the rifts all over the kingdom. As she's in prison, she gets accompanied by a light fairy known as the name Tri, and Tri actually grants her a magical power to use echoes thanks to a magical staff. Echoes allow her to copy things in the real world and actually create duplicates thanks to Tri's power. Zelda then uses this very power to escape her imprisonment and makes her way outside of the castle. Tri has the power to bring Zelda into the Still World, which is the inside of all the rifts that's covering Hyrule. Inside the rifts are imprisoned creatures like Tri that Tri calls their friends. And Tri's friends seem to be captured by some type of giant creature at the end of the dungeons that lie within the Still World rifts. Halfway through the dungeon, Zelda runs into Link, but quickly realizes it doesn't seem to be him, as he immediately tries to attack her. This in fact seems to be yet again another evil copy, very similar to what her father had went through, but this time Zelda has to take out a dark version of Link. After Link is defeated, he dissipates and drops his sword, once again leaving the weapon behind, very similar to how Ganon's weapon was also left behind. When Zelda picks up Link's sword, it imbues her with the spirit of the hero, allowing her to be a swordsman just like Link and have the powers and abilities that he has, which allows her to dispel darkness within the Still World. Finally, the two reach the end of the dungeon, which puts them face to face to one of the giant creatures I previously mentioned that homes Tri's friends. After the creature is defeated, we see tons of little Tri friends start floating through the air, and they're all used to quickly dispel the rift amongst Hyrule. And this would have to be done with all of the rifts amongst the area in order to completely cleanse the world of this dark energy. Zelda is then put out on her adventure, where she will have to go throughout the various regions, sealing up as many rifts as she possibly can. But after visiting and helping out both the Gerudo and Zora regions, she realizes Hyrule Castle Town seems to be completely taken over by dark creatures and also rifts of many sorts. She makes her way inside a dark version of Hyrule Castle within the rift, and as she's in the Still World, she has to go up against once again a Echo version of Ganon. After defeating the Echo of Ganon, all the Tris are dispelled and they're freed from their imprisonment once again. They help to restore Castle Town and its inhabitants back to normal. Right before Zelda can exit the Still World and leave the castle, a wall breaks down, revealing some type of ancient creepy beast shrouded by the same purple darkness of the rifts in the Still World. Thankfully, the real Link jumps in and comes to the rescue, even though all he has at the time is a wooden stick. But now, Link finds himself imprisoned by this beast, and Zelda is pulled out of the Still World from Tri at the last second. Now, for everyone else within the Still World, they're brought to a frozen corpse, almost like a statue, as they float aimlessly until they're recovered by tries. But for some reason, Link was actually able to remain intact and move around freely in the still world before his imprisonment. As soon as Zelda returns, she finds even more rifts have appeared across the land, in the Eldin, Faron, and Lonairu regions, which she has to go investigate and close. The king mentions, however, that those 3 areas are areas of prime energy, and all he knows is prime energy is some source of limitless power within the kingdom. That those 3 regions were connected to the 3 goddesses. Now let's back up a second. If you don't know who the 3 goddesses were, they actually were described at the beginning of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64, and it states that the 3 goddesses would descend from the heavens and actually create the world of Hyrule that we know today. Din, the goddess of power, created the actual land. Nehru is the goddess of wisdom that created science and magic. Farore, the goddess of courage, was the creator of all life here in Hyrule. After their creation, they would leave behind a relic, being the Triforce, which was a piece of all of their powers put into one mystical force. Apparently these 3 regions are rich with this prime energy, and they use the word prime energy to talk about the Triforce, which is strange because it comes off as if they don't know the name of this relic. In fact, they don't even know the name of Ganon until Tri actually tells them that it's Ganon. Most of them just refer to the creature as the big blue monster. So it appears that these rifts were not appearing in random places, but trying to take out civilizations in the strongest parts of Hyrule. Now learning the 3 most important parts, the parts that actually home the prime energy. Zelda will then head to Eldin. Well, in my case, this is where I went first. It might be different with your playthrough, but the first dungeon within this section of the game. After completing the dungeon, she saves the Tries from a beast being Volvagia, once again returning from Ocarina of Time, which does seem to maybe be an echo of this creature from another timeline. Upon releasing him and releasing the Tries, Zelda is greeted by a white light and is referred to as the Priestess. Din, the goddess of power, speaks to Zelda and also gives her one of her sanctions, and tells Zelda that she will need the other 2 sanctions of the 2 other goddesses in order to be revealed the doorway to the prime energy. But it isn't until she reaches the second dungeon in this section, in my case being Lanairu, where Nehru will actually fill Zelda in with what's going on and the history behind this war. She states how before Hyrule there was nothingness, just an endless void. In fact, this is the first time we'll ever hear of a story that actually takes place before the events of Skyward Sword, even before the before events of Skyward Sword. She speaks how everything would get consumed, even when life would try to start or anything would try to grow, it would get consumed by the darkness. Null was in control of this darkness, and that's all it wanted, was complete and utter control over everything, where everything would be consumed in darkness that tried to grow. It is then stated that these 3 goddesses created the skies and the land to imprison Null beneath, and over the years, Null would try to escape by opening rifts across the land, but these rifts would be quickly closed up by guardians, and these guardians were called Tries, and these Tries were made simply as almost protective angels over the land from the goddesses themselves. As Null would try to rip up and contain the world, the guardians, being the Tries, would seal them back up. This completely changes everything. This tells of a new story of creation before all the events in the timeline that we know and love, and tell us how this world was actually created not just for a place to home civilizations and people, but actually for a world to imprison Null. So yes, there's technically an ancient evil even older than Ganon himself, or even Demise in this case. Demise was always the earliest recorded evil that we would know of, as he was just the embodiment of darkness that actually appeared one day. To counteract this, the 3 goddesses would create another goddess to rule the land and the people down below in order to directly confront Demise, the source of evil himself. This would be the goddess Hylia, which would eventually reincarnate as the soul of the goddess, being in Zelda every single generation. So Echoes of Wisdom actually goes back to that story of creation at the beginning of Ocarina of Time, showing us how the world was created, and now we know why the world was created. Before any Ganon could even sprout or any other evil could even take form, this was the world at its beginning. It does beg the question, is Demise just an evil thread of Null? Is Null technically the original evil, the original calamity, the original Ganon and Demise in this timeline? It's hard to say, but it definitely seems like Null had some type of huge play in the background this entire time. And it's a pretty strange coincidence how both Null and Demise are imprisoned underneath the earth and both try to escape multiple times before being sealed away. This is a huge chunk of lore, like as big as the first time we actually learned about Demise being the ancient evil of Ganon. Learning of another ancient evil even before Ganon is pretty surprising, especially for a top-down 2D Zelda game that was almost a spin-off in some sorts that featured Zelda as the playable character instead of Link. But then we'd head to the Faron region for the final dungeon and the final sanction. And the mini-boss of this dungeon seems to be yet again another past boss, being an echo of Manhandla. And even though its body never does dissipate, and some people might consider this not being an echo, it does seem to be a dark echo, as the heads pop off and burst into purple smoke, and it even releases purple poison from time to time. Zelda will then be greeted by the last goddess, being Furore, that will grant her her final sanction. However, when exiting the temple with the 3 sanctions, Zelda will be ambushed by Null himself. Null completely swarms Zelda in dark energy and actually creates an echo, a dark form of her like he's done her father, the King of Hyrule, and the hero of courage being Link. Zelda then makes her way straight for the Great Deku Tree, who is the guardian of the Prime Energy, and claims how he's already let in the fake Zelda and he was fooled by her likeness. He then lowers the real Zelda down through a stone pedestal, where the real Zelda will come face to face with the evil copy. Using the sanctions that the evil copy had stolen, he's able to summon the Prime Energy, which is indeed the Triforce. But in a very similar way to Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time, when coming in contact with the Triforce with an unbalanced spirit, it actually breaks the Triforce in 3 pieces, sending one piece, the Triforce of Wisdom, to Zelda, and the other piece, the Triforce of Power, to Null. The third piece, being the Triforce of Courage, flies straight through a rift into the Still World and goes straight to Link. Both Zeldas jump into the Still World in order to reach Link, and it takes a Zelda versus Zelda battle in order to dispel the evil echo and free Link from his imprisonment, circling back to the beginning of this game where Link was actually the one to rescue Zelda. Zelda then returns all of his items and his sword and shield back to Link, where he's then able to slice open an entrance into Null's body, where the two will work together until they can navigate to the very end in order to defeat Null himself. Coming face to face with the creature, Null states how the goddesses had taken everything from him. And he uses the Triforce of Power not only to devour most of the land in a giant rift, but also to transform himself into an even greater evil. Zelda and Link team up for an epic battle, with Zelda's echo abilities and Tri's help, with the courage of Link helping with his trusty dusty sword and shield in hand. They're able to take down Null in Phase 1. Phase 2 has Null trying to escape through a void, but Link is actually held back as he's able to take out the arms of the creature that are still seemingly spawning in. Zelda then continues to chase the creature through an underwater-like area. In this area, we can see tons of Tris that seem to be imprisoned in the background in these bubbly containers, and even Tris being held by the mangled tentacles of the creature itself. It seems over the years, Null was actually able to escape his imprisonment by feeding off of the Tris that would come into the rift zones in order to seal them. He would imprison them and slowly consume them in order to grow more and more powerful. This would then lead into a final phase, where Null would have tentacles growing in every which way, and Link would have to cut them off as Zelda was able to pull them free, allowing Zelda, with the help of Link, to finally pull free the Triforce of Power from Null's grasp. Doing so completely weakens Null's power to a completely dampened state. And with the Triforce now intact, Link and Zelda interacts with it in order to dispel light energy across the entire kingdom of Hyrule, completely repairing every rift that was created and completely obliterating Null in the process. However, it still is unknown if this world exists in another dimension. Is there still the Still World out there, or has it been completely eradicated? Is there a chance for Null to ever make a return, or has he been completely defeated by the Triforce and Tri's power as well? It's really hard to say right now, but as of now, it looks like Null had been defeated for good. It then leaves us with a sad scene of Zelda having to say goodbye to her friend Tri, and this sequence with Zelda and Tri is a complete parallel to Link and Fi from The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, with both Tri and Fi were made as guardians for one another, as Tri was made as a guardian in order to seal up rifts that would plague Hyrule from Null. Fi was made as a guardian for the Master Sword, to live as the soul of the sword for generations to come, to constantly help the hero in his time of need, although she would never leave the sword in the future. Both Fi and Tri have the same robotic, almost childlike look to them, where thankfully Tri has a little bit more of a personality and actually is learning certain things that human personalities have, like gaining emotions like feeling and love. It's a sad departure, but it's one that's needed, as the Tris are no longer needed to repair the world anymore. Link and Zelda then return to Hyrule, where they tell everyone about their journey, and Link tells everybody how Zelda did pretty much all the work, and yeah, he's actually speaking to people. But the day and Kingdom of Hyrule are saved once again, thanks to Link and Zelda. And in the post-credit scene, we see that Zelda actually keeps the Tri-Rod and hangs it in her room as a memory of her adventures and her best buddy Tri. Now look, as far as where this goes on the timeline, this is something that I don't know if I could actually distinguish or find out. It's impossible for us to just guess right now, and I know some people can make some predictions as to where it goes. This is the current timeline based on the Masterworks book that Nintendo released, where they show that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom seem to be in its own little separate timeline, or at least so far off in the future that they're not completely lined up with any of the branching timelines. Now, I've seen some people say for us to have a boss battle of Ganon being an echo, clearly Ganon had to exist in some form before this, but in his pig form, which means it could go all the way back to right after The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords, which is the first time in the timeline that we actually see Pig Ganon. Although he does have a shocking resemblance to the version in Link to the Past, which would take us all the way to the beginning of the Hero is Defeated timeline. Some other things that would help prove this is the original battle against Volvagia actually happened in Ocarina of Time, so we know that echoes would probably have to happen afterwards if this is an echo of that same boss. It could be another Volvagia, it's hard to say. We see different variants of bosses throughout the timeline, but also having Manhandla as a boss battle would also lead credence to this. Now, Manhandla did also appear in The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords, but looked vastly different than the one we see in this game, where the one from Oracle of Seasons matches the one of Echoes. So personally, I think the best place to slot this game would be in the Hero's Downfall timeline, right between the Oracle of Games and The Legend of Zelda Link Between Worlds. Now, of course, this is just using some of the information that we got, like some of the boss echoes. I mean, this could go very deep if you include the enemies as well, because man, you could probably go a lot deeper looking at all the enemies that were used as echoes, and maybe there's a whole video that can be used just for that. We also have information like no one knowing what the Triforce is and just calling it the Prime Energy, and also no one knowing who Ganon is, which has happened from time to time, but normally there's a record kept of the beast, and normally the kingdom knows about his return or something about his return. But there is one thing that we can add to the timeline for sure, and it's the creation of the world along with the imprisonment of Null, well before the events of Skyward Sword. But there's still a lot of stuff to be deciphered. I mean, the game hasn't even been out for a week yet, so there will be new theories and new information to talk about. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe before you head out, and also feel free to check out Zeltik's channel on YouTube. If you're a Zelda fan, odds are you've already heard of it, because he goes in deeper detail about the whole entire timeline. I'll even link the video to the timeline explained, so that way you can better understand if you're not too familiar with it. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See ya, guys.